Hi, we're going over geometric sequences in our toolkit today. Okay, so first thing we want to look at is what is a geometric sequence? So geometric sequence is basically like a list of numbers. Okay, so we'll call it a sequence or list of numbers in which the ratio, for ratio we use the variable r, so the ratio r remains constant. Okay, so in this case with a geometric sequence, we're always going to be multiplying. Okay, our common ratio r is found by dividing each term in the list. So each term by the previous term. Okay, and so we have here how to find it. We kind of looked at that already. R is found by dividing each term by the previous term. So choose any term. Except the first one. And divide by the one before it. Okay, so let's try that here. Let's go down to, we have a few list of numbers. So first thing we're actually going to do, we are going to determine if this is a geometric sequence. And if it is, we're going to find that common ratio. Okay, so what I'm looking at here in my list of numbers, I'm going to take my negative 14. I'm going to divide it by the number in front of it, 7, and that's going to give me negative 2. Okay, so in order to be a geometric sequence, to get from one term to the next, I need to be multiplying by negative 2. So 7 times negative 2 is negative 14, so that works. Negative 14 times negative 2 is positive 28. Negative times negative is positive. 28 times negative 2 is negative 56. So yes, this one here would be geometric. We would say yes, and r is negative 2. That's the value that we're multiplying by. Okay. In our next sequence here, I'm going to take my first number, 18, divided by the number in front of it, 6. When I do that, we get 3. Now I just need to check, is everything multiply in my list to get the next number, 3. So 6 times 3 is 18. 18 times 3 is not 24. So this is not a geometric sequence, not geometric. Okay. We'll look at our third example. We can take a number, negative 40, divided by the number in front of it, 80. Negative 40 divided by 80 is going to be negative 1/2. So we basically need to know that the numbers are being multiplied by a half each time we go from one term to the next term. So half of 80, that would, and it's negative, to be negative 40. Half of 40, change the sign because it's negative, that would be 20. Half of 20, that is 10. So yes, this is geometric, and the ratio is negative 1/2. You could put 0.5 also, that works. Okay. And then in our last sequence here, we have negative 36. The number in front of it is negative 9. When we divide these, we get 4. And then we just need to make sure everything else divides the same way. So maybe I'll check this a little bit differently than we've checked the other terms. Let's check. So we did second number divided by first. Okay, we got 4. Let's try third number divided by the second number. So negative 144 divided by negative 36. When I divide that on my calculator, I get 4. And then let's check this. Is the fourth number divided by the number in front of it also 4? Is negative 576 divided by negative 144 equal to 4 as well? And it is. So when they all divide and equal the same thing, we would say yes. So that's another strategy to solve it. Take each number, divide it by the number in front, and make sure you're getting the same ratio. So our ratio here is 4 for this. Okay. All right, so we have an equation that's going to help us write out an equation for a sequence. So the equation that we're going to use for this, we call it A sub n. N is the term number, nth term, or term number, so we call it. A sub n equals A sub 0. A sub 0 is our 0th term, initial term. I'll just call it 0th term. Multiplied with the common ratio times n. So this r that's our common ratio. Okay. So what we're going to do here, we're going to take our examples. Now we're telling you that these examples are geometric, so they do have a common ratio, and we're going to write an equation for them. So when we write out an equation, the only values that we really need to determine are the A sub 0, and we need a common ratio. Because in our equation, we're going to write out A sub n equals, I'm going to put my A sub 0 value here, I'm going to put my r here and my n here. So I'm just going to erase these two things. And we're going to replace those with the value of A sub 0 and the value for ratio. Okay, so here's my list of numbers. This is the first number. This is the second number. This is the third number. I need this imaginary 0th number, the number that comes before it. Okay, so I'm going to write out my list off to the side so we can get rid of this. 3, 9, 27. So I need this number here that comes before. Well, first thing let's do is find our common ratio. Our common ratio, we can take any number except for the first one. Let's take 9 divided by the number in front of it, 3. That is our common ratio. Ratio is 3. So that means from one number to the next number in this sequence, we are multiplying by 3. Now, the opposite of multiplying by 3, to go in reverse, we can divide by 3. 3 divided by 3 is going to give us 1. That is our 0th term. So 1. Now all I do is I plug in my 1 here and I plug in my common ratio of 3 here. Okay, let's look at our next question. We're going to find those two values. Oh wait, I'm sorry. We need to find one more thing here. We need to find our 7th term. So let's do A sub 7. You could find your 7th term just by continuing this list of numbers, okay? Also, A sub 7, we're just going to plug it into the equation. We have 1 times 3 to the power of 7. So we need to, on our calculator, figure out how do we get a 7th power? Because 3 to the power of 7th is 3 times 3 times 3 times 3 times 3 times 3 times 3. Well, we don't want to write that. We're just going to do 3 to the 7th power. Remember, on your calculator, it's that little caret symbol. Looks like a little hat. It looks like this on your calculator. It's right above the x squared button on your calculator. So it looks like this. That will give you the power. So we're going to do 3 to the 7th power. 3 caret 7. Let me plug this into my calculator. And that's going to give me 2,000. So the 7th term is 2,187. So that's one thing that we're looking for. And then we have our A sub n. That's our equation. The other thing that we're looking for. You could find the 7th term just by continuing your list. If I take 27 on my calculator, that's the 3rd term. Multiply by 3. Multiply by 3. Multiply by 3. Multiply by 3. I'm going to get to that 7th term eventually, and I'll get that same value, that 2,187. Okay. Let's try our next one. We want our A sub 0. We want our common ratio. Finding common ratio first. Okay, so we take 20 divided by the number in front, and that is -5. That's our common ratio. Okay. Now to find our 0th term, we take our first term and we can divide it by the common ratio. So our first term, -4, divided by our common ratio, -5. And let's put a little a sub 0 equals a sub 1 divided by ratio. Okay, and that's what we did on this first problem. We took our first term, 3, we divided it by 1. So that's going to just be -4/5. You can leave it, +4/5. You can leave it as a fraction, 4/5, or you can write it as 0.8. That works as well. Do the decimal value. So now we can write our equation. A sub n equals our 0th term, so 0.8 times our common ratio to the power of n. That is how we write out our equation. And then we want to find the 7th term. So let's do a sub 7 equals, we'll write out our equation, and then we'll do -5 in parentheses to the power of 7. So make sure in your calculator, you're typing it in exactly. So in your calculator, type 0.8, and then I would write a parentheses with a -5, and then the power of 7. Okay, that caret 7. That's going to be -62,500, our 7th term here. We're going to try 2 more together, and then we'll finish up these last ones in class. Okay, so next one here, we want our common ratio. We want our a sub 0. And so we're going to take our second term, 200. We're going to divide that by the number in front of it, 400. And that's equal to 1/2. You can leave it as 1/2, or you can write it as 0.5. That is our common ratio. Now we find our 0th term, a sub 0, equals the first number, which is 400, divided by our common ratio, 0.5. So 400 divided by 0.5. It's also easier to divide sometimes by decimals than it is to divide by fractions, and that's going to be 800. Okay, and if you think about it, that makes sense. If I start here with 800, take half of it, that's 400. Take half of it, that's 200. Take half of that, that's 100. So that's going to be 800 for our 0th term. So our equation a sub n equals our 0th term multiplied by our common ratio to the power of n. That's our equation. Now we're going to find our 7th term. So 800, 0.5 to the power of 7. So again, type that in directly into your calculator, 800 parentheses 0.5 to the 7th power. And a sub 7 is going to equal 6.25. Okay, here we've got -12. Let's divide that by the number in front of it. -12 divided by 6 is -2. That's our common ratio. Our a sub 0 is our first number divided by our common ratio, which is -2. So that's going to be -12. Okay, now we can write out our equation for that. Oh, I'm sorry. I multiplied it. That's going to be -3. -3. Okay, and that makes sense. We'll start with a -3 here. -3, we multiply that by -2, we get 6. Multiply that by -2, we get -12, and so forth. So a sub n equals our 0th term. Multiply with our common ratio to the power of n, our 7th term, and then put that in your calculator, and that gives us 384. And here's your equation. So now you can go ahead and try some of the problems in your packet.